It's a quiet summer morning in Albany, Oregon, as the fresh sunlight casts a soft orange glow on the houses lining 6th Avenue. On this day, sunrise is at 5:40 a.m., and there is little activity on the residential streets of this Willamette Valley city. Even the rails are quiet for now, a condition which will persist throughout the day. But what Albany lacks in mainline railroad action, it makes up for in railfan interest, and that's what we were after in this Sunrise to Sunset production. We're starting the day at a location known as the Toledo Y, where Portland and Western's Toledo district joins the Union Pacific Brooklyn subdivision. UP knows this location as control point VP 692, North Albany. This is only the railroad's name for the location. There is an actual section of town called North Albany across the Willamette River from here, on the Toledo district itself. Our first train of the day is a southbound manifest on the Brooklyn subdivision, which is UP's main line between Portland and Eugene and extending south to Oak Ridge. This is train MPDEU, which operates almost daily from Portland to Eugene. Albany has several crossings within a mile-long stretch of track, and we are hearing the train long before we see it. Two General Electric locomotives bracket a Progress Rail SD70 ACE on this train. Number 2596 is classified by UP as a C45AH, the H indicating extra weight on board for better traction. The third locomotive is an older AC4400CW and is a former Southern Pacific unit. Already we have a surprise on this train, a pair of Republic Services containers in garbage service. These containers are normally confined to operation between Northwest Washington and landfills in the Columbia River Gorge, all of these locations to the north of here. Albany is located in the heart of Oregon's Willamette Valley, with a population of almost 57,000. The area is largely agricultural, and in fact almost all of the grass seed shipped around the world originates in this region. Albany was and still is an important crossroads for railroads in the area, with 3 freight railroads plus Amtrak currently serving the city. Albany's early development was shaped by the Willamette River, and that applied to the railroads as well. Union Pacific's Brooklyn subdivision makes 2 sweeping curves in Albany and briefly runs on a general east-to-west routing. This line is single track, and passing sidings are located to the north at Millersburg and to the south at Hallowell. Portland and Western's Oregon Electric District runs generally parallel to UP and skirts the Albany waterfront as it runs between Beaverton and Eugene. P&W also operates the Toledo District, which crosses the river to the north and then turns west toward Corvallis and Toledo. To the south, Albany and Eastern runs east to Lebanon. There are many places to watch trains in Albany, and in this video, we'll only sample a few of them. The freight train caused a slight delay to Amtrak 500 south of Albany, as it took the siding at Hallowell to get out of the way of the passenger train. The Brooklyn subdivision is almost entirely single track, and while a good dispatcher can usually execute train meets with minimal delay to passengers, the unexpected can sometimes happen. We can see 500 now, making its scheduled stop at Albany about 10 minutes late. Number 500 is a daily Cascades train from Eugene to Seattle. The Cascades service is the only service outside of Europe to use the Spanish Talgo train sets. These are scheduled to be supplemented and/or replaced by new train sets in the next 3 years. Following behind number 500 is the daily ZLCTM, a high-priority intermodal service from Los Angeles to Tacoma, Washington. The train type Z indicates a very high-priority train, inferior only to Amtrak. It protects scheduled shipping for some of the companies that load on the train, such as UPS. We've relocated to the busiest spot in Albany, the crossing at Queen Avenue. The busy road crosses 4 tracks here. On the far side of the crossing from our location is the UP Main Line. The other 3 tracks are part of the former Southern Pacific Yard, now operated by Portland and Western. P&W's Albany switcher works 2 shifts at this end of the yard throughout the day, so depending on when the crew has finished their work, there's a high probability of seeing a train here. Depending on how much switching needs to be done, the crossing can remain blocked for quite a while. Here, the switcher is shoving a long cut of cars into what is called the pass track for a later pickup. This cut of cars represents about 2 days' worth of traffic from Portland and Western trains, as UP skipped the pickup the previous day. P&W ships a lot of forest products, including lumber and paper, which come into Albany on the West Sider and the Toledo Hauler. The West Sider also handles a lot of agricultural and steel products. A major draw for railfans is the power assigned to the Albany switcher, engine number 1501, an ex-Southern Pacific SD7. Since its arrival at P&W in 1998, the locomotive has been at work on this job almost constantly, looking right at home in this former SP environment. Number 1501 was originally built as Southern Pacific 5280 and used as a road engine in the early days of dieselization. It was eventually relegated to yard service in Roseville, California, going to P&W predecessor Willamette and Pacific as SP 1539. Since that time, the locomotive has gone through some cosmetic changes and has received a new horn and electronic bell. Still, the engine looks just like a hard-working SP locomotive, and the sound of the 567 engine block chugging away brings back memories of the days when sister model SD9s were the backbone of SP's Oregon branch line empire. 1501 moves to 8-track to bring out a bad order car and move it to the repair tracks at the north end of the yard. These cars are for the Toledo hauler. SCFX 115413 is the offending car. You can just barely see the bad order tag above the truck in the middle of the graffiti. The car is left just clear of the yard ladder, so that the switch crew does not have to shove the entire cut to the other end of the yard. It's hard to get enough of that classic 567 sound, and 1501 puts on a good show. The crossing is activated on the yard tracks at specific locations. Often, the switcher will get too close and set off the crossing without actually entering the roadway. We hope that any motorists caught by this occurrence can at least appreciate the small pointless delay over the long switching delay they could have experienced. Train MEUPD, a Eugene to Portland train, arrives in Albany behind two more AC 4400 CWs. Number 6312 is another XSP unit, while 6677 was built new for UP in 1997. This train will stop here and will pick up the cut of cars from Pass Track. We will see this operation in a moment. While scouting for our next location, we heard the Albany and Eastern job on the scanner and raced back to Queen Avenue. The arriving train caught us on the wrong side of the crossing and facing the sun. This job is known simply as the hauler and works between Lebanon and Albany 5 days a week. Albany and Eastern is a short-line railroad headquartered in nearby Lebanon. The railroad operates about 60 miles of ex-Southern Pacific and Burlington Northern track, reaching from Albany to Mill City and Sweet Home. A&E also operates a small branch line out of Corvallis for a local farm. The railroad operates excursion trains, and you can see the best of that operation in our Steam Up the Santiam video. With its outbound cars in tow, engine 5957 makes its way out of the yard and back to home rails. This locomotive was built by General Electric as a B40-8 for CSX, and still wears its CSX number. Before coming to A&E, it was repowered by Western Rail of Spokane, Washington, and derated to 2,000 horsepower. The conductor is back on board, and the train can now depart Albany. In addition to its number, 5957 kept the original CSX horn as well. As the short A&E train departs, the MEUPD is getting to work pulling its outbound cut. Let's go watch as they finish their work and head out of town. We've moved up to Old Salem Road, where the MEUPD power is holding after completing the pickup. The rear cars of the train needed to clear a work zone at the Amtrak station before the pickup could be made, so the train is much farther up on the line than it normally would be. The result is that the train is blocking most of Albany's crossings for an extended time while the air test is made and the conductor walks all the way back to the head end. After another short delay while a paperwork issue is resolved, the train is finally underway. It will take the siding 3 miles ahead at Millersburg to wait for a southbound train. The GEs are powerful locomotives, but they still struggle to bring the 81 loaded cars to track speed. OE Junction is located on the Portland and Western near Davidson Road. Here, a connecting track splits from the railroad's Oregon Electric District to reach the main yard at Albany. P&W has a second yard near Millersburg, which is referred to as the Albany OE yard. SD9 number 1852 is in charge of the switching duties today, and it's a real treat to see the old gyrolite in action as the locomotive works. The southbound train that the MEUPD was waiting for is ISELC, an intermodal train from Seattle to Los Angeles. It is the counterpart to ZLCTM, although it doesn't operate on as strict of a schedule. The third unit is a Kansas City Southern SD70 ACE, and represents the most recent railroad to become a fallen flag, as KCS was merged into Canadian Pacific earlier in the year. The Oregon Electric District is a former interurban line. OE was a subsidiary of the Spokane, Portland, and Seattle Railway, which became part of Burlington Northern in 1970. P&W operates the entire remainder of the line, including this section of track down the middle of Water Avenue. P&W's Albany Hauler uses this line and usually runs in darkness. OE passenger trains ran down Fifth Avenue in Albany. Wear and tear on the street surface has exposed some of the original rail and the brick paving in front of the old station. The station itself has gone through several uses since the passenger trains stopped in 1933, most recently as a pizza restaurant. This restaurant has recently moved, and another local dining venue is reportedly looking at taking over the space. We are now at the Albany station to see Amtrak 503, a southbound train to Eugene. At the north end of the yard, crews are working on cleaning a fuel spill from a UP locomotive. The victim is sitting near the yard office, waiting to be moved to a repair shop. Crews are at work building a new high-level platform for Albany, which will make boarding trains easier. Unfortunately, the digital information display informed us that 503 had been cancelled due to an earlier equipment issue. Afternoon train 508 uses the same equipment, so that train was cancelled as well, and therefore we will not see them in this production. In addition to trains, the Oregon end of the Cascades corridor uses buses to provide connections to trains in Portland and to several communities not served by rail. The Albany station was built in 1909 by the Southern Pacific, and it has served passengers almost continuously since then. Willamette Pacific once had offices here, but moved to another location in the early 2000s. A renovation followed, and the station now has a much larger waiting room and provides connections to local transit services in addition to Amtrak. The former Railway Express Agency building to the north has been converted into transit offices. Inside the station, it's hard to hear approaching trains, and this one caught us by surprise. MHKEU operates from Hinkle, Oregon, near Hermiston, to Eugene. Most of the cars will be switched locally, but some will be forwarded to Roseville on other trains. A historical photo of the Albany Bicycle Club graces the old operator's window, which also provides a great vantage point to watch trains. Queen Avenue is just out of sight around the curve. (1501) has now ventured to this end of the yard to do some work. At around the same time, the northbound Coast Starlight, train number 14, is arriving on its daily run from Los Angeles to Seattle. Following number 14 is a northbound MRVPT running from Roseville to Portland. "1501 has now brought two ballast hoppers down to the north end of the platform to assist with the spill and track repair. While the fire engine responds to a medical call, let's take the opportunity to appreciate some of the finer details of this classic locomotive. The build date on this hopper shows 1962. The car is a full 10 years younger than 1501. The locomotive has a half-size fuel tank, which EMD once offered as a way to reduce weight on lighter rail. As the switch crew waits to be needed at the worksite, the southbound Coast Starlight, train number 11, arrives behind engine number 308. It's interesting to watch Amtrak's newest power and P&W's oldest side by side, even briefly, two locomotives separated in age by a full 70 years. The open window of the dining car is releasing some amazing smells during the station stop. Soon it will be time to begin dinner service on board. The track crew is now ready, and 1501 is summoned forward with the ballast cars. We happened to speak to someone at the station earlier who had witnessed the fuel spill. A section of rail had broken, and while it did not cause a derailment, the broken end of the rail sprang up into the fuel tank of the locomotive involved. The train was a UP local working out of Salem. Dust clouds fly as the ballast is released from the hoppers. We learned that due to the obstruction in the yard, there had been no Toledo hauler the night before, and there would also not be one today. Normally, this train returns to Albany just before or just after Train 11, and departs in the late evening. A few days later, however, we were able to catch the inbound Toledo hauler, and have included it here as a point of reference. On this day, the inbound crew was short on time and had to be relieved here at the base of the Willamette River Bridge. The Toledo hauler runs 5 days a week to serve a large Georgia Pacific paper mill in the coastal town of Toledo. Often, the entire train is Georgia Pacific cars. Once the crew is on board, they secure authority from the UP dispatcher in Omaha to cross the main line and enter the yard. According to the city of Albany, the gravel next to the track here is Lafayette Street, and exists to serve a small cluster of residences here. The backbone of the P&W fleet is 4-axle locomotives from EMD. However, the railroad also owns this slug for use on the Toledo hauler, which provides extra traction and dynamic braking on the steep grades of the Toledo district. The slug was rebuilt from a GP-18 by the Norfolk and Western Railroad and has a model designation of RPE4D. A derail protects against any errant cars or trains rolling onto the UP line by mistake. The shadows are lengthening as we find ourselves back at Queen Avenue. In the distance, we have a decent view of the P&W locomotive shops. To the south is control point VP 690, listed in the UP timetable as South Albany. The night crew has now taken over 1501 and sets about their work. During this lull, we noticed a couple of long-eared railfans grabbing a quick snack. Wood chips are crucial in the papermaking process. The outbound Toledo hauler usually has these at the front of the train, followed by boxcars loaded with scrap paper. Empty boxcars will be placed at the rear. As the switcher brings down another cut of cars, the air hoses disconnect and bring the train to a stop. With the air reconnected, 1501 can continue with its work. These 3 cars came from the Albany and Eastern earlier today. They will be going out on tonight's Eugene hauler, which operates as a turn out of Eugene and handles UP traffic to and from points south. Our last mainline train of the day is Amtrak 505, running from Seattle to Eugene. 1501 shoves the A&E cars down the pass track. The Eugene hauler will have to do some interesting switching tonight due to the work at the north end of the yard, and part of that will involve arriving on this track and shoving these cars out of the yard before getting the rest of their outbound train. This day turned out to be the last time that we would see 1501 in action. Acting on a federal court order for P&W parent company Genesee and Wyoming to dispose of several dozen locomotives that did not meet federal emissions guidelines, 1501 was retired 5 days after these videos were made. The order prevents use of the prime mover again, so if 1501 is to see another life, it will either be with a new engine block or on static display. P&W's 2 remaining SD9s and lone GP9 were part of the same court order, and they are expected to be retired by the end of 2023. It's a sad end to an era, but a time to celebrate the extra life these locomotives received with their final owner. As 1501 heads back to the yard office to wait for more work, we officially reach sunset on this day in Albany. As you can see, while the main line doesn't have the train frequency usually associated with a hotspot, there is still usually something to see, and the variety of trains and locomotives here cannot be overlooked. UP occasionally operates other trains on the line, mostly grain trains to and from Canada, often with non-UP locomotives. Even without the older locomotives, Albany will remain a fascinating place to watch trains, from sunrise to sunset.